The elevators had not yet begun their usual metallic chorus when Maya Ellis stepped onto the 54th floor of Caldwell Tower and felt the sharp chill that came from glass walls meeting the first light of winter. The vast open office was silent except for the faint hum of the air system that never slept. She moved in with careful footsteps, the wheels of her cleaning cart whispering across the polished floor as if afraid to disturb something sacred. This early hour was supposed to belong only to her, to the quiet, to the small comfort of finishing her tasks before anyone with a real title arrived. She wrapped her thin jacket tighter around herself and began wiping down the tall panes of glass that framed the skyline. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out quickly, assuming it was her friend checking on her double shifts again, the one person who texted her before sunrise. A message blinked on the screen. "Miss you." Maya smiled at the simple warmth of it and typed a quick reply. "I miss you too." Her thumb hovered a moment before sliding to send. Then her entire body went cold. The name above the text thread was not her friend. It was Adrian Caldwell, the CEO, the man whose photograph appeared in business magazines with captions calling him a visionary in artificial intelligence. The man employees avoided even glancing at during board visits. The man who had never spoken to her. She froze as if the floor had cracked beneath her. Her breath stuttered. Her thumb must have slipped when she tapped the notification. She stared, horrified, at the blue bubble glowing with her words. "I miss you too." Her pulse hammered so violently she felt it in her teeth. She did not have a plan except to wish for the impossible, that perhaps the universe would reverse the last 3 seconds. But the universe did nothing. Instead, it opened the door behind her. Footsteps. Slow. Steady. Claiming the room in a way that it could only belong to someone used to being obeyed without speaking. She turned her head because she had no choice. Adrian Caldwell stepped into the open office wearing a charcoal suit that made his shoulders look too broad for the stillness around him. His expression was quiet in a way that carried more weight than any anger. He lifted his wrist slightly, and the screen of his watch brightened. Maya saw the faint reflection of her own message glowing on it. His stride paused. Not in shock, not in outrage. Something else. Something unreadable. Maya backed up a fraction, gripping the edge of her cart to keep her balance. Her heart felt too big for her chest and too fragile at the same time. Adrian raised his eyes to her, and in that moment the silence of the entire floor felt like it was holding its breath. He did not speak at first. He simply moved toward her, each step even, and unhurried as if he were approaching something already familiar. Maya felt the heat rise beneath her skin as he closed the distance until only a few inches remained. She could not understand why he would come this close. She could not understand why he looked at her as if she were not invisible at all. She should have apologized. She should have tried to explain. But no words formed. Her throat refused to open. Adrian lowered his head slightly enough that she could feel the faint shift of the air between them. His voice was deep, quiet, steady. "Say it again." Maya could not move. She could not breathe. The sound of his words wrapped around her like something dangerous and soft at once. She had never been spoken to like that by anyone, let alone by a man who could end her employment with a sentence. "Say it again." He repeated it like an invitation and a command woven into one. A few early arriving employees stopped in the hallway, watching, whispering, unsure of what they were seeing. Maya felt the blood drain from her face as the world narrowed to the inches between her and the man who should have ignored her existence entirely. She had made a mistake that should have ruined her morning and possibly her job. Instead, she was standing in the center of a moment she did not understand, a moment that felt like the air itself had changed. Adrian straightened just enough to meet her eyes fully, and there was something in his gaze she did not know how to name. Not amusement, not annoyance. Something far more dangerous. Then he stepped back, leaving her heart racing in the empty space he had occupied. Maya clutched her phone with shaking fingers. She did not know why he had reacted that way. She did not know why her name was still displayed on his watch. She did not know why he whispered to her as if her words mattered. But she knew one thing, with a clarity that terrified her. Whatever had just happened was not over. She had triggered something in this building, in this man, in this day. Something she was not prepared for. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the panic, a truth flickered like the first spark of a storm. She had changed the course of everything without meaning to. She simply did not know how much. 10 days earlier, the world had been quieter and crueler in ways Maya Ellis had grown used to carrying alone. The Bronx apartment she shared with her younger brother Noah was barely large enough for 2 people, and the walls were thin enough that she could hear the couple next door arguing every night. Still, she treated the small space as a sanctuary, a place where she could collapse after double shifts and pretend for a few minutes that life was not demanding more from her than she could give. She rose each morning before the sun, pulling on thrift store sneakers and the plain black uniform that marked her as temporary staff. The subway ride into Manhattan always smelled like metal and old rain, but she found comfort in the routine. It meant she was moving. It meant Noah would have the medication he needed, even if insurance refused to cover half of it. It meant she was still trying. She checked the red thread bracelet around her wrist before every shift. It was frayed and softened with age, a tiny knot near the center where her mother had tied it the year she turned 10. Her mother had whispered then that everyone carried a thread connecting them to someone who would truly see them, and that someday the person at the other end would find her. Maya never believed in fate, not really, but she never once removed the bracelet. She could not let go of the last thing in the world that had ever made her feel chosen. Caldwell Tower stood in stark contrast to everything she grew up with. 45 stories of glass rising like a promise to the wealthiest skyline in the country. Inside, the hallways glowed with a cold blue sheen, and the silence was so sharp it almost rang in her ears. Everything she touched while cleaning felt expensive enough to shatter her breathing. She moved through her tasks with a humility learned from survival, careful not to attract attention. In places like these, the help was not meant to be seen. Only the consequences of their absence were. Most days, she barely exchanged more than a handful of words with anyone on the upper floors. The executives did not greet her. The assistants barely acknowledged her. Security nodded only because it was part of their job. That was fine with her. Being invisible was safe. Being noticed was not. Her first encounter with Adrian Caldwell had been brief enough that she assumed he did not register her existence. She had been dusting the shelves of the 70-foot lobby while he walked through with 2 investors. His posture alone was enough to quiet the entire room. Tall, composed expression, unreadable, the kind of man whose presence felt like power stripped of noise. His voice had been low and precise as he explained projected models and artificial intelligence. She did not understand a word, but she understood his silence. It was the kind that came from a life lived 2 steps ahead of everyone else. She remembered thinking he looked as if he had traded sleep for brilliance, that he wore loneliness like part of his suit, that he did not belong in her world any more than she belonged in his. She expected never to see him again, yet fate often disguised itself as a small scheduling error. 10 days earlier, her supervisor had abruptly reassigned her to higher floors due to a staff shortage. Suddenly, she found herself responsible for cleaning the executive level on alternating days. The first time she stepped off the elevator on floor 54, her breath faltered. The air felt thinner up there, the kind of atmosphere where careers were built and destroyed with equal elegance. She had been warned not to speak unless spoken to, not to touch anything unnecessarily, not to linger, especially not near the corner suite with the frosted glass door. Caldwell office. She had nodded obediently and kept her head down as she pushed her cart down the silent hall. The office lights were off. She was told Adrian rarely arrived before 9 unless there was a crisis. She moved quickly, wiping surfaces, aligning chairs, collecting stray glasses left behind from late-night briefings. Every time she looked toward the closed door, she felt a strange pull in her stomach as though something behind it was watching, even though she knew that was impossible. On her 4th day assigned to that floor, she accidentally dropped a microfiber cloth outside his office. It made a soft sound, barely noticeable, but something happened. The frosted door that had been closed all morning clicked slightly as if someone inside had paused. She waited, frozen, but footsteps never came. When she knelt to pick up the cloth, she told herself she imagined the sound. It was easier to believe that Adrian Caldwell did not notice her at all. She did not belong in his story. She belonged to the forgotten corners of the building. Still, she felt faintly shaken, like a thread she did not know was attached to her had shivered. That night, she worked her second job at a small diner off East Tremont Avenue. The place smelled like burnt coffee and nostalgia. Noah often sat at the counter doing homework in the hours between his after-school program and her shift ending. She served plates of pancakes to regulars while listening to Noah explain a science project he was excited about. Her exhaustion softened whenever he smiled. She would have worked 3 more jobs if she had to. He was the reason she held herself upright every day. After her shift, she walked him home through the cold fingers numb from the wind, promising him that someday things would get easier. She did not know if she believed that either. The next morning, she returned to Caldwell Tower for another shift. Her supervisor handed her a printed schedule. "You will be covering the CEO office for early morning maintenance this week," he said. "Are you comfortable with that?" She nodded before she understood what it meant. He continued, "He will be present some mornings. Do not disturb him. Do not make noise. Do not speak. Do not look in his direction. Complete your tasks and leave." She swallowed hard. Yes, of course. She tried not to let her hands shake as she tucked the schedule into her pocket. Later that day, while cleaning an unused conference room, she overheard 2 employees whispering. "Adrian is coming in early for a private strategy sprint," one of them said. 5 a.m. Nobody else is allowed up there unless authorized. Maya froze. She was scheduled at exactly that hour. The accidental overlap carved a tremor through her chest. Cleaning near the CEO was intimidating enough. Working alone on his floor while he was present felt like stepping into a place she had never been invited. She reminded herself that she was invisible, that he would not notice, that she only had to follow rules. Still, she could not forget the slight shift she sensed behind that frosted door when she dropped the cloth. She could not forget how quiet the air became whenever she walked near his office. She could not forget the way people spoke his name with a mixture of fear and respect. She could not forget that he was a man the world saw clearly while she spent her life trying not to be seen. As she rode the subway home that evening, the bracelet brushed her wrist again and again like a heartbeat. Her mother had believed in threads of fate. Maya did not, but she could not ignore the feeling that something was moving toward her, something she could not name yet. On the morning everything changed, she woke before her alarm pulled on her uniform, tied her hair back, and whispered a silent prayer to no one in particular. She took the first train arrived at Caldwell Tower before dawn and stepped into the empty elevator that would carry her to a floor she never imagined would alter the course of her life. She did not know then that a mistake made with trembling fingers would collide with a man the world feared and admired in equal measure. She did not know she was walking into the beginning of a story her mother might have believed in. She only knew she had work to do, and she had no idea someone at the top of that tower was already closer to seeing her than she realized. The morning they collided did not begin with anything extraordinary. It began with the faint smell of industrial cleaner drifting through the elevators and the soft echo of Maya's footsteps as she pushed her cart onto the 54th floor. The city outside was still waking heavy clouds, dimming the sunrise into a muted gray that pressed against the glass walls. Maya exhaled slowly. Gathering herself the way she always did before entering a space she was never meant to belong in. She adjusted the strap of her apron, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and wheeled the cart along the quiet hallway toward the office she had been dreading all week. The frosted door of the CEO suite stood at the end of the corridor like a boundary she had no intention of crossing. Her supervisor had been explicit. Do not disturb him. Do not make noise. Do not look in his direction. Finish quickly. Leave faster. She repeated the words silently as she approached, willing her nerves to steady. Her hands were cold, even through the thin latex gloves she wore. She moved with deliberate quiet, wiping down the tall glass partitions, aligning chairs with their precise angles, collecting coffee mugs left behind from late-night meetings. She focused on breathing, counting each movement like a ritual to keep her invisible. But fate rarely respects rules made by others. She had reached the corner near his office when the broom slipped from her cart. It fell with a soft clatter. Nothing loud. Nothing that should have mattered, but the air shifted instantly. The sound seemed to echo in the stillness in a way that felt unnatural. Maya froze. Her breath caught. She slowly straightened, eyes fixed on the broom lying a few feet away. Then it happened. A faint click from behind the frosted door. Not a full opening, not even enough to reveal a silhouette, but a movement unmistakable in a floor that did not tolerate accidents. Her heart leapt to her throat. She crouched quickly to pick up the broom, fingers trembling as she grasped it. She told herself the sound meant nothing. Just the building settling. Just imagination amplified by nerves. Yet, something about it felt intentional. As if someone inside had paused. As if someone had listened. She carried on with her tasks, trying to ignore how her pulse skipped whenever the elevator dinged or distant footsteps echoed along the hall. Still, she had nearly finished the floor when she passed the office door again and noticed a faint glow beneath it. Someone was inside. She swallowed hard and kept her gaze low as she hurried past. She did not dare look. She wiped down the conference table outside the suite, her movements smaller than usual, as though the slightest sound might betray her presence. Her thoughts drifted unwillingly to Adrian Caldwell. He had always seemed like a figure from another world. The media called him a prodigy, a strategist, the architect of algorithms that changed entire industries. Employees whispered that he could read a room without speaking, that he noticed things no one else did, that he trusted almost no one. To Maya, he had always been an untouchable silhouette behind glass and security protocols. But now, the silhouette had weight-breath footsteps proximity, and she was the only other person on the floor. When she moved to wipe a fingerprint from the glass partition opposite the CEO door, she caught a glimpse of something unexpected. A photograph on a shelf inside the office. The angle of the glass created a reflection that allowed her to see it clearly. A young boy standing by a lake, his smile bright but his eyes shaded by something too heavy for childhood. The frame was simple, unadorned. For a fleeting moment she wondered if the boy was Adrian, if loneliness had begun early for him too. She turned away, quickly scolding herself for gazing too long. It was not her place to wonder about the life of a man whose world existed far above hers. She needed to finish her work and leave before her presence became a problem. She was wiping down the corner desk near the windows when she heard footsteps inside the CEO office. Not heavy, not rushed. Calm, deliberate, measured. Her breath stilled as the door opened just enough for a sliver of light to spill into the hallway. Maya stepped back instinctively. She did not raise her head, but she could feel a presence. The air changed around him, thicker somehow, like a current passing through a narrow channel. She sensed his gaze before she dared confirm it. When she finally looked up, he was standing in the doorway. Adrian Caldwell. Awake early. Alone. And watching her. His expression was unreadable, not cold, but concentrated, as if he were studying a detail no one else would have seen. She felt the weight of that gaze travel through her in a way she could not explain. She nodded quickly, a reflex more than a greeting, and whispered a soft apology, even though she had done nothing wrong. He did not reply. Instead, his eyes drifted briefly to the red thread around her wrist, lingering half a second too long to be accidental. Then he stepped into the office again without a word and closed the door. Maya exhaled a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Her pulse fluttered as she backed away from the suite, trying to refocus on her tasks. She worked faster, eager to leave the floor before she embarrassed herself further. Yet something in that moment had shifted. It felt as though an invisible curtain had rustled between them, revealing just enough space for possibility and danger to coexist. For the next few days, the encounters continued. Small, silent, charged. She would enter early to find him already inside, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly mussed, eyes fixed on his monitors. He never spoke, but every time she moved quietly around him, she felt that same awareness, a subtle energy that made her hyper-conscious of every step she took. Once she dropped a stack of sanitized cloths. Before she could bend down, he turned sharply, as if attuned to even the softest disruptions in the room. Their eyes met again, and she felt the same strange pull she could not name. Another morning, she found his office unexpectedly empty but noticed a book left open on the corner of his desk. A biography about leadership and resilience. A single line was underlined in faint pencil. Even storms require silence. She wondered who he was without the suit, without the expectations, without the empire he carried on his shoulders. She wondered why he always seemed so alone. Sienna Blake noticed everything. A woman whose ambition clung to her like perfume, she watched Maya with thinly veiled disdain. Sienna's heels clicked sharply whenever she passed, as though reminding the world she belonged to a tier above almost everyone. When she saw Maya exiting the CEO suite one morning, her lips curved in a slow, calculating smile. "Interesting," she said under her breath. Maya pretended she did not hear. She could not afford to. By the end of that week, whispers had begun drifting through the break rooms. Someone had seen the maid near the CEO office again. Someone had heard he asked not to be disturbed except by her. Someone had noticed the way he looked up when she walked past. None of it was true, and yet none of it was entirely false. There was something there even if she did not understand it. Something building quietly like pressure beneath a sealed door. And then came the morning that would rewrite the shape of her life. The one when she woke early, boarded the train, climbed the stairs of Caldwell Tower, and stepped onto a floor where she believed she could finish her tasks before the world stirred. She thought it would be just another shift, another quiet morning, another hour spent invisible. She did not yet know that in a handful of minutes she would send a message to the wrong man, and that the man who should have ignored her completely would cross the space between them with a whisper that would mark the beginning of everything that followed. By the time Maya returned to the 54th floor later that morning, the atmosphere had shifted into something sharp enough to sting. Whispers traveled faster than truth in Caldwell Tower, and this time they moved with the velocity of wildfire. It began with two interns passing each other near the espresso machine, their voices low, but their eyes wide. "Did you hear?" The maid texted him. Which him? The CEO. Someone else leaned in, pretending to refill her water bottle just to catch the details. Word spread with astonishing precision, as if the walls themselves repeated the story at every opportunity. Even those who had not seen the moment replayed imagined versions of it, adding embellishments until the rumor felt like fact. Maya felt it long before she heard it directly. The glances that slid over her like thin blades. The silence that stretched too long when she entered a room. The stiffening posture of employees who moved aside as if proximity to her might burn them. She pushed her cleaning cart into the hallway, her breath shallow and uneven. She had not slept since the incident. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Adrian's face inches from hers, heard the low command, say it again, echoing in a loop she could not escape. She tried to bury it behind work, behind motions drilled into her until they became almost muscle memory. Wipe, replace, straighten, sweep. But her fingers trembled at every task. She reached the glass divider near accounting and overheard someone speak loud enough to ensure she would catch it. "I would have quit already. Imagine texting the CEO that." Another voice replied, "She will be gone by the end of the day. HR definitely has a file open already." Maya kept her head down. She was trained to disappear, and she tried desperately to reclaim that invisibility now, yet the rumor carved its path no matter how small she made herself. Near the elevator bank, two analysts tried to whisper quietly but failed. She sent him, "I miss you." I swear. I saw him walk toward her after, like he cared. He did not care. He was probably furious. He did not look furious. He looked. Their voices faded when they realized she was there. Maya's throat tightened. She wanted to defend herself, but there was nothing to say that would not make matters worse. She had made a mistake. She had texted the wrong person. But the part she could not understand, the part that haunted her, was not the mistake itself. It was his reaction. She replayed the moment constantly. How his gaze had pinned her in place without cruelty. How he had stepped toward her without hesitation. How he had whispered those words as if the air belonged to them alone. Say it again. She felt heat rise under her skin at the memory and immediately forced the thought away. She could not afford to think like that. Not when she was merely trying to keep her job. When she turned a corner, she collided with Sienna Blake. Papers nearly slipped from Sienna's hand, though Maya suspected the gesture was theatrical. Watch where you are going. Sienna's tone was clipped precise, crafted for public humiliation. Maya murmured an apology and reached to steady the cleaning cart. Sienna leaned in slightly, her voice a silken blade. Busy morning for you, I imagine. The entire building is talking about your little message. Maya froze, but said nothing. Sienna continued. You know, things like this do not end well for people at your level. Best to prepare yourself. The threat hung between them, unmasked and intentional. Before Maya could respond, Sienna walked away, her heels puncturing the silence with each step. Maya gripped the cart handle until her knuckles whitened. She felt smaller than she had in years. She moved on, struggling to force her mind back into work. When she reached the far end of the floor, she found a notification flashing on her phone. New email, HR department. Her stomach dropped. She opened it hesitantly. Meeting request a discussion about boundaries and employee conduct. Scheduled for 11:30. Mandatory. She nearly lost her balance. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She reread the lines again and again, hoping they would rearrange into something harmless. They did not. This was it. This was how she would lose everything. Her income, her stability, her ability to support Noah. Her breath began to shake. The walls seemed too close, the ceiling too low, her world too fragile. She forced herself to keep moving because stopping would mean breaking. She was cleaning the frame of a glass partition when the hallway thickened with tension. She sensed him before she saw him, a presence like gravity. Adrian Caldwell stepped out of a conference room and into the open corridor. He had not changed since that morning, but the world had. His expression was carved from stillness, his gaze focused and unreadable as always. Yet, when he looked up and saw Maya standing frozen near the wall, something shifted beneath the facade. Something sharp and immediate. For a moment, the entire corridor seemed to pause. Conversations faltered. Footsteps softened. Maya felt rooted to the floor, unable to look away. He did not speak to her, did not acknowledge the rumor in the air, but his eyes flicked briefly to her phone as if he somehow knew, or sensed, or understood. Then she saw it. The slightest tightening of his hand, a subtle curl of his fingers into his palm, a sign of contained reaction so small no one else would have noticed. But she did. She noticed because she was watching him the way someone watched a storm they hoped would not break open. Adrian turned away after a moment and continued walking down the hall. Employees shifted uneasily as he passed. They felt the tension too, even if they did not know its source. Maya pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady herself. She needed to focus. She needed to survive the meeting. At 11:25, she made her way to HR, her steps so light it felt like she was floating rather than walking. She waited outside the conference room, her palms sweating through her gloves. She imagined worst-case scenarios. Formal reprimand. Immediate termination. Security escort. She inhaled shakily as the door opened. The HR representative, a woman with a sympathetic smile that did little to soothe, gestured her inside. Maya stepped in alone. The room smelled faintly of coffee and worry. She sat in the chair offered to her, folding her hands in her lap to hide the trembling. We received a concerning report this morning, the HR woman began. A personal message sent to an executive that could be interpreted as inappropriate. We must discuss expectations for professional boundaries. Maya swallowed. It was a mistake, she whispered. My phone slipped when I tried to respond to a friend. I did not mean to send it. The woman nodded politely, but her tone remained clinical. Intentions matter less than impact in these cases. We simply need to document what happened. Document. The word landed like a verdict. Her breath wavered. She stared at her hands, unable to find a voice strong enough to defend herself. The HR representative slid a form across the table. "If you sign this, we can close the matter quickly." Maya reached for the pen with trembling fingers. Her future felt like a thread pulled too tight. Before the pen touched the paper, the door opened with a soft but unmistakable sound. The entire room stilled. Adrian Caldwell stepped inside. His presence swallowed the space so completely that even the air seemed to shift away from him. He did not look at the HR representative. He did not look at the paperwork. He looked only at Maya, and in that gaze was something that made her breath stop. He walked forward with calm certainty and pulled out the chair beside her, lowering himself into it as if it was the only place he intended to be. The HR representative blinked in confusion. "Mr. Caldwell, we did not expect." Adrian spoke quietly but with authority that left no room for debate. "If you discipline her, you discipline me." Silence fell like a dropped curtain. Maya stared at him in disbelief. He continued evenly. "She will not apologize for something she did not do." The HR representative opened her mouth, then closed it again. She nodded stiffly. "We will review the file. Thank you for your time." Adrian rose, his gaze briefly softening as it passed over Maya. Then he left the room without waiting for acknowledgement. Maya sat motionless, her heart pounding with confusion. Fear, relief, and something dangerously close to wonder. She had walked into the meeting alone. But she had not remained alone. She had no idea why. No idea what it meant. But, for the first time, the whispers in the office were no longer just about her mistake. They were about him, and the line he had just crossed without hesitation. The door had barely closed behind Adrian when Maya realized she was still gripping the pen so tightly it threatened to snap. Her pulse thundered in her ears as the HR representative shuffled the untouched paperwork, clearly flustered. "Thank you, Maya," she murmured awkwardly. "We will follow up soon. You are excused." Maya nodded stiffly and rose from her chair, though her legs felt unsteady. She stepped into the hallway where the fluorescent lights seemed too bright, too sharp, too revealing. The moment she left the conference room, she heard it. The soft swell of whispers moving like a tide. Adrian Caldwell had walked into HR for her, sat beside her, defended her. The building was already vibrating with speculation and shock. She felt the weight of every stare as she pushed her cart toward the elevators. Her thoughts were a tangled knot of disbelief and confusion, and something she dared not name. Adrian had said, "If you discipline her, you discipline me." Those were not words spoken by a man concerned about corporate optics. Those were words spoken with intent, with precision, with meaning. But meaning she could not afford to interpret. The elevator doors opened and she slipped inside, praying for silence. Instead, 2 employees entered behind her, speaking in low, urgent voices. "I heard he interrupted the meeting himself. He never attends HR meetings. Ever." Another voice replied, "Except for the maid, apparently. What is going on between them?" Maya kept her eyes fixed on the metal panel, watching the numbers descend. Her throat tightened. She wanted to disappear into the floor. When she reached the lobby, she practically fled into the service hallway where no executives ever wandered. She pressed her back to the wall, breathing hard. Her hands shook as she pulled off her gloves. Adrian stepping in had changed everything. Not the rumor. The rumor had grown its own limbs long before he stood beside her. What changed was the narrative. Before he spoke, she had been an insignificant mistake, an unfortunate accident. Now she was something people were watching, something they were interpreting, something they were dissecting. She hated it. It made her feel exposed. It made her feel noticed for the wrong reasons. And yet, beneath all that fear, something else flickered. Something that warmed the edges of her chest despite everything. "He did not have to defend me." She whispered it aloud, as if hearing the words might make them real. Her shift felt twice as long that day. By early afternoon, her supervisor summoned her abruptly. "We need to talk." His expression was tight, unreadable. He gestured toward a small storage office off the loading dock. Maya followed reluctantly. Once inside, he shut the door. "What happened this morning?" he demanded in a hushed tone. I just received 3 calls from HR. Maya swallowed. It was a misunderstanding. I sent a text accidentally. That was all. He pinched the bridge of his nose. You have put us in a very difficult position, Maya. We cannot have staff creating disturbances on the executive floor. She opened her mouth, but he raised a hand. However, given Mr. Caldwell's statement, HR will not be writing you up at this time. Maya blinked. Relief and mortification tangled violently in her stomach. Do not give anyone else a reason to question your professionalism, her supervisor warned, and stay away from anything that could be misconstrued. Yes, of course, she whispered. Dismissed, she returned to her cart and resumed her routine, though she could barely focus on surface-level tasks. The building felt different now, as if every hallway had eyes. When she reached the 54th floor again later that day, it was almost empty. Most employees attended a midday briefing on level 20. The silence was both a comfort and a curse. She wheeled her cart slowly along the corridor, passing the glass door of the CEO suite. Her breath hitched when she realized the door was slightly ajar. She had never seen it open before unless he was entering or exiting. She hesitated only a second before forcing herself to continue. She could not risk another perceived boundary issue. But as she moved her cart, she heard footsteps and stiffened instinctively. Adrian stepped into the hallway. He was alone. No assistants, no board members, no security. Just him. For an instant, they simply stared at each other. Maya felt her pulse spike so sharply she almost reached for the wall to steady herself. He looked different alone in the quiet. Not the enigmatic CEO she had glimpsed from afar, not the silent storm of the headlines, but a man whose gaze held something she could not decipher, something that unsettled her in ways she was not prepared to admit. "You should not have been summoned like that," he said calmly as he approached. His voice remained low-measured, yet undeniably protective. Maya lowered her eyes. "I did not mean for any of this to happen. It was just a mistake." "I know." His tone softened, but only slightly. "And yet they treated you as if you committed an offense. You did not." She swallowed. "'Tis fine. It is done." He studied her a moment longer than necessary. "It is not fine," he said quietly. "They should not have made you feel small." She looked up then, eyes widening. Adrian continued, "And I do not appreciate when people use fear to control those who cannot fight back." Her breath caught. Every word sounded like he was speaking from experience, from history carved into silence. She felt her chest tighten. "Thank you for what you did earlier," she whispered. "You did not have to." He tilted his head slightly as if surprised she believed that. "I do not do things I do not mean." She felt heat rise in her cheeks so sudden it startled her. He glanced at her cart, then at the red thread bracelet around her wrist. His gaze lingered again longer this time. When he finally met her eyes, his voice dropped even further. "If you ever feel cornered or unsafe, come to my office." Her heart lurched painfully. "That is not appropriate," she whispered. "You are my employer." His lips curved in something that was not quite a smile, but not quite neutrality either. "I am not asking for formality. I am offering safety." She did not know what to do with that. With him. With the way he looked at her like he saw more than a cleaning uniform and trembling hands. But before she could respond, Sienna's sharp voice sliced down the hallway. "Mr. Caldwell, I have the revised projections you asked for." As she approached, her gaze flicked to Maya, dripping disdain. Adrian's expression shuddered instantly, returning to the cold, impenetrable version the company knew. "Thank you, Sienna," he said, stepping back toward his office. "Have them sent to my desk." He nodded once toward Maya, a gesture subtle enough that Sienna would not interpret it. Then he disappeared behind the closing door. Sienna looked at Maya with open hostility. "I would watch yourself if I were you. Some people do not like when lines are crossed." Maya forced her voice steady. "I have not crossed anything." Sienna's smile was thin, cruel. "That is the thing about lines. People above you decide where they are." With that, she turned and strode away, leaving the words to fester in the quiet. Maya stood alone in the hallway, chest, tight throat heavy. She did not understand why Adrian defended her or what he expected from her. She only knew that today a boundary had been crossed. And not by her. And now the entire building was waiting to see what happened next. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of adrenaline and caution. Maya moved through her tasks with mechanical precision, refusing to let her mind linger on the HR meeting or the hallway conversation or the way Adrian's gaze had held hers for a heartbeat too long. She told herself she needed distance. She needed clarity. She needed her life to return to something that resembled normal, but normal no longer existed in the same way it had yesterday, and she felt it every time she glanced toward the frosted glass door of the CEO suite. Shortly after 5, her supervisor radioed the cleaning team. Executive floor sweep required. Maya stiffened. She knew what that meant. She would need to return to the 54th floor one more time that day. Her pulse fluttered nervously as the elevator climbed each floor, dinging like a countdown to something she could not name. When the doors slid open, the hallway was empty except for the hum of recessed lighting and the distant city noise vibrating through the glass. She pushed her cart forward quietly, every sound magnified in the stillness. She was wiping fingerprints from the conference table near the corner when she felt it. A presence. Not imagined. Not mistaken. Real. She turned slowly. Adrian was standing in the doorway of his sweat sleeves rolled to his forearms tie, loosened the faint exhaustion of a 14-hour workday softened across his features. He looked nothing like the untouchable figure who commanded entire industries. He looked human, and that made him more dangerous to her heart than the storm he usually carried. Maya froze, cloth in hand, unsure whether to acknowledge him or flee. But he stepped forward before she could decide, and his voice low and steady as warm steel cut through the silence. "Stay." She stilled. The word was not a command, though he was a man accustomed to giving them. It sounded almost like a request. He walked toward her with quiet steps, leaving a comfortable distance yet filling the entire room with his presence. "I wanted to speak to you without an audience," he said. Maya swallowed hard. "I should not be here. Not while you are working. It is part of your job to be here," he replied gently, "and right now we need clarity more than distance." Clarity. The word landed somewhere deep beneath her ribs. She nodded but kept her gaze low, focusing on the smooth surface of the table. "What happened earlier," he continued, "should never have involved you. They moved too quickly, interpreted too freely. That is not acceptable." Maya bit the inside of her cheek. "But people think I did something inappropriate. People enjoy believing whatever story entertains them most." His tone held a trace of irritation, not at her, but at the building that thrived on speculation. She hesitated before speaking again. "You should not have come to HR. It could affect your reputation." "Your leadership. The board. I can handle my reputation, Maya." His voice softened unexpectedly. "What I cannot tolerate is watching someone punished for something they did not do." She dared to look up then. His eyes were dark, intense, sincere. For a moment it felt like falling. She gathered her thoughts shakily. I did not mean to send you that message. I know." His words were immediate. "I was not offended." She blinked. "You were not." His mouth twitched as though he fought a smile he rarely allowed himself. "No, it was unexpected, yes, but not offensive." Maya looked away again, heat rising to her cheeks. She twisted the edge of her cloth nervously. I feel like everyone is watching me." "They are. But they are watching because people fear what they do not understand, and because they have never seen me intervene for someone before." She froze. Her breath stalled. "Why would you?" "Because you were alone in that room, and you should not have been." His voice held a quiet conviction that made something inside her tremble. Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken things. Then his gaze lowered to her wrist. The red thread caught the light, frayed yet still vibrant. He stepped closer. "May I ask? That bracelet, what does it mean?" Her fingers reflexively covered it as though shielding something private. "It was my mother's. She used to say the person meant for you would notice it before anyone else." She gave a small, self-conscious laugh. "Just a story. Something to comfort a child." Adrian's expression changed. Not softer exactly, but deeper. He reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away. When she did not, he touched the thread lightly with the back of his knuckle. The contact was brief, barely there, yet it sent a shiver through her that she prayed he could not see. "I noticed it the first day," he said quietly. She inhaled sharply. "Why?" His gaze held hers completely now. "Because it seemed important to you." Maya could not breathe for a moment. She felt exposed in a way that was not frightening but intimate, as though someone had opened a door she never unlocked herself. Adrian stepped back slightly, then giving her space. "I know you did not intend to message me, but if you ever do send something, by mistake again." He paused long enough to make her heartbeat stutter. "Tell me the message you meant to send." Her breath hitched. She could not think, could not speak, could not understand why he would say such a thing. His eyes lowered to her lips for a fraction of a second before returning to her gaze. The shift was so subtle she wondered if she imagined it, but the warmth that surged through her was real. Adrian exhaled slowly as though grounding himself. "You should go for today. They will talk less tomorrow." She nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. He gave the smallest nod in return, then turned toward his office but paused at the doorway. "Maya." She looked up. "You are not in trouble. You never were." She felt something unravel inside her, something she had kept bound for years. When she finally gathered her cart and made her way to the elevator, her legs felt unsteady, not with fear but with the weight of something unfamiliar, hope. On her way out of the building, she pressed her hand to her chest, trying to calm the rapid beat beneath her palm. She knew nothing about his intentions, nothing about why he looked at her the way he did. Nothing about the line they were approaching, yet neither seemed willing to draw. All she knew was this: she was not invisible anymore, and that terrified her more than anything. By the next morning, the rumor was no longer a whisper. It had evolved into a weapon sharpened by repetition and wielded with unsettling enthusiasm. Maya felt it the moment she stepped through the security gate. Conversations cut off abruptly. Eyes flicked up from screens. People leaned closer to each other as soon as she passed, their hushed voices slicing through the air like thin paper cuts. She pushed her cart forward, refusing to look left or right, but the atmosphere followed her like a shadow she could not outrun. On the 42nd floor, 2 marketing employees stood near the espresso bar, pretending to select coffee pods. She heard one say, "I swear, she was in his office alone last night." A second voice whispered, "That is why he defended her. Men like him do not risk their reputation for nothing." Maya's stomach tightened. She did not know whether to laugh at the absurdity or cry at the cruelty. None of them knew what happened. None of them would believe the truth, even if she told it. And she could not risk speaking at all. Not when her job, her record, her ability to support Noah depended on every step she took being quiet and correct. She moved into the elevator, praying for an empty ride to the upper floors, but 3 employees slipped in at the last second. They lowered their voices only slightly. "I heard Sienna is documenting everything another said. If she gets enough evidence, the board could use it against him." Evidence of what? Even the elevator lights seemed harsh as Maya gripped her cart tighter. She stepped out on the 54th floor, where the silence felt heavier than usual. She began her routine with deliberate focus, wiping down the walls, disinfecting the door handles, aligning the conference chairs with precise distances. But the whispers found her anyway. Someone had posted an anonymous thread in the company forum titled, "Why is the CEO protecting the maid?" Comments flooded in. Someone claimed they saw him walking behind her. Another said they overheard laughter from his office. Someone else suggested an affair. Maya felt the ground shift beneath her. She had done nothing. Yet people built entire narratives around a single mistake. Worse than the rumors were the eyes watching her like she was a spark that might ignite a scandal big enough to consume the entire building. Near midday, her supervisor gave her a strained look. "HR wants updated logs of your shifts," he said quietly. "Do not worry, just routine." But his eyes said otherwise. Her throat tightened. Routine was another word for suspicion, and suspicion meant vulnerability. She pushed the cart down the hall toward the restroom corridor when she saw it, a new memo taped to the wall. Clear boundaries between executives and support staff. No personal communication between levels. No entering executive offices without explicit approval. No interaction that may be interpreted as preferential treatment. Maya stared at it long enough for her heartbeat to double. The memo was not about general policy. It was about her mistake, her proximity, her existence becoming inconvenient. She sensed movement behind her. Sienna Blake appeared with a folder pressed to her chest and a smirk carved onto her face like fine glass. "Rough week for you," she said lightly, though her voice dripped with satisfaction. Maya kept her gaze on the memo. "I have work to finish." Sienna stepped closer. "You should know, corporate weather changes fast. And right now, you are standing in a storm you cannot survive." Maya felt a tremor run down her spine. "I did nothing wrong." Sienna's smile widened. "People rarely need wrongdoing, they only need assumption. And right now the assumption is that you matter to him. That makes you a target." She leaned in slightly. "And I do not miss." With that, she walked away, heels striking the floor in perfect, rhythmic confidence. Maya breathed through the rising panic. She could not afford to break. Not here, not now. She continued her tasks, forcing her fingers to stop shaking long enough to fold towels and refill dispensers. But inside she was unraveling. She reached the conference area just as her phone buzzed with a new notification. Unknown sender. She unlocked it with trembling hands, expecting another HR notice. Instead, she found a single message. "If anyone makes you feel unsafe, come to my office." Her breath caught. His name was not listed, but she knew exactly who sent it. Adrian. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to keep moving, not to stare at the phone too long. Not to hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope made people reckless. Hope made people believe they mattered. Still, the message warmed something deep inside her chest. He noticed. He cared. He meant it. But that only made everything worse. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of sharp comments and side glances. Someone purposely bumped her shoulder in the hallway. Someone else muttered maid privileges under their breath, and every new whisper built into something poisonous. By 3 o'clock, she reached the break room to refill her cart's supplies when 2 employees burst into conversation behind her. "Did you see the picture someone took?" "What picture?" "Of her leaving the CEO hallway last night. It is on Slack." Maya froze mid-step. Picture, Slack. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She set down a box of sanitizing wipes and walked as calmly as she could toward the service stairwell. Once the door closed behind her, she pressed her back against the wall, her breath shuddering in and out. She opened the Slack app on her phone. And there it was. Anonymous upload. Blurry but unmistakable. Maya's silhouette in the dim lights outside Adrian's office, and a caption that sliced through her like a blade. "Looks like someone has special access." Her vision blurred. She felt dizzy with humiliation, fear, and something deeper that she refused to name. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream. But instead, she slid her phone into her pocket, wiped her eyes with her sleeve, and forced herself to go back to work. It did not matter what they believed. It could not matter. She had to finish her shift. She had to get paid. She had to support Noah. The world could burn around her as long as she kept standing, or so she told herself. But even she had limits. As she turned the corner near the executive stairwell, she found Adrian standing at the far end of the hall, speaking quietly with a department head. His posture was composed, but tension radiated off him like heat. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The department head left quickly, leaving Adrian alone. He turned just enough to see her. Their eyes met across the hall. She had expected indifference or frustration or polite neutrality. Instead, she saw something she had never seen in his expression before. Restraint. Sharp and barely controlled. As if the world around them was testing him and he was one breath away from breaking the silence he lived behind. Maya swallowed. She could not approach him. Not with the new memo, not with the rumors, not with the photo circulating like poison. She lowered her gaze and moved past him, her heart pounding wildly. But as she did, she heard him speak softly enough that only she would hear. "You are not alone in this." She did not dare look back. Not when she felt herself breaking from the inside, not when she knew that one glance might make all her walls collapse. She continued down the hall, her pulse shaking her entire frame. She did not realize she was crying until a tear hit the back of her hand. She wiped it, quickly looked around to ensure no one saw, and curled her fingers into a fist. She had survived worse. She would survive this, too. She had to. But she did not yet know that the rumor had only begun its damage, and soon it would cost both of them far more than whispered judgments. Night settled over Caldwell Tower with the kind of hush that made even steel and glass feel lonely. The 54th floor emptied faster than usual as employees rushed home eager to escape the rumor storm that had thickened the entire day. By 7 o'clock, only the hum of ventilation and the distant city horns remained. Maya stayed behind to finish the last of her duties, grateful for the quiet even though it unsettled her. Silence meant no whispers, no eyes, no judgment. But it also meant she was alone on a floor that no longer felt safe. She moved down the hallway, restocking sanitizers and wiping surfaces with trembling fingers. Her nerves were frayed from hours of being watched, discussed, dissected. She wanted to go home, to hide, to breathe. Just one more conference room, she told herself, then the restrooms, then leave. She pushed her cart toward the small equipment closet near the end of the corridor. The lock had been faulty for months, the latch sticking if you closed it too quickly. She had learned to leave her foot in the doorway to avoid getting trapped. Tonight, she forgot. Or perhaps she was too tired. Or perhaps fate had a hand in it. She stepped inside to grab a box of paper towels, nudged the door closed with her elbow out of habit, and heard the soft, devastating click of the latch sealing. Her breath stalled. She froze. The room was pitch black except for a faint sliver of hallway light under the door. She pushed the handle. It did not move. She pushed harder. Nothing. The sound of the latch echoed through her memory like a nightmare she had lived before. Locked rooms. Darkness. Breath tightening until it felt like drowning. She pressed her palms to the door, her heartbeat rattling against her ribs. No, no, no. Not here, not again. She banged on the door, hoping a security guard might pass, but the sound was swallowed by the thick walls. The building shifted into after-hours mode at 7:30. Entire floors powered down. No one walked this hallway after that time except her. Panic clawed at her throat. She tried to steady her breathing, but the darkness pressed in too tightly, squeezing, suffocating. A memory flashed. Being 8 years old, trapped in a basement storage room after a storm knocked out the electricity. Noah crying. Her mother pounding the door. Hours before someone found them. The shadows had felt alive, hungry. She had never forgotten, never escaped the fear. Now it wrapped around her like cold hands. Her breath came faster, her chest rising too quickly. She pressed her forehead to the door. "Please, someone." Her voice broke. She tried again, but it emerged as barely a whisper. The walls absorbed her plea. She sank to the floor, gripping the red thread on her wrist like a lifeline. Her pulse pounded so loudly she could not hear anything else. Minutes blurred. Or maybe only seconds passed. She did not know. She only knew she was sinking into a familiar terror she thought she had buried. Until she heard it. A sound she almost mistook for imagination. Footsteps. Calm. Measured. Moving down the hall. Her breath hitched violently. She banged on the door again weakly. "Help!" The footsteps paused, then accelerated. The handle rattled from the outside. "Maya!" She gasped at the voice. "Adrian! Hold on!" His tone was sharp but steady. He jiggled the handle, tested the lock, then without hesitation spoke into his phone. "Bring me a master key to 54. Now!" But even before anyone could answer, she heard him curse softly under his breath. Then the sound of metal hitting metal. He was trying to force it. The crack of pressure against the lock. Another hit. Another. The latch finally gave with a harsh snap, and the door swung open. Maya blinked against the sudden wash of hallway light. Her breath came in shudders, her vision blurred. Adrian stood in the doorway, chest rising with exertion from breaking the lock. When he saw her crouched on the floor, his expression changed entirely. The cold CEO exterior evaporated, replaced by something raw and unmistakably human. He crouched quickly. "Maya, are you hurt?" She shook her head, though she could barely breathe. Her fingers trembled uncontrollably. He reached toward her, but stopped half an inch from touching her as if giving her space to choose. When she did not pull away, he placed a steady hand on her shoulder, the warmth grounding her like an anchor thrown into storm water. "You are safe," he said quietly. "You are out. Breathe with me." She inhaled shakily, but her body would not obey. Her breaths came short and sharp. Adrian moved closer, though still careful not to overwhelm her. "Look at me," he murmured. Slowly she raised her eyes. His gaze held hers with such deliberate gentleness that her lungs finally found a pattern to follow. In, out, slow, steady. His hand moved to his suit jacket and he slipped it off, placing it gently over her shoulders. The fabric was warm, heavy with his scent. She clutched it as though it could shield her heartbeat from shattering. "Who did this?" he asked quietly. The question held an edge of contained fury. She shook her head. "I do not know." "The latch sticks sometimes." His jaw tightened. "Someone knew you would be here alone. That was not an accident." She could not meet his eyes. She did not want him to see how fragile she felt, how ashamed she was of her fear, but Adrian seemed to read her anyway. "You do not have to be strong right now," he said softly. "You do that every day. Let this moment be different." The words cracked something inside her. Her vision blurred again, not from fear this time, but from relief. She had carried her entire life on her shoulders since her mother died. She had never allowed herself a moment to collapse. But here, in a dark hallway, in a building where she was supposed to be invisible, she felt seen in the way her mother's red thread had once promised. When she finally lifted her wrist to adjust the jacket, she realized the bracelet had slipped off. Her breath caught. The panic surged again, but Adrian noticed instantly. "What is it?" She pointed weakly toward the dark closet. It fell. "My bracelet." Without a word, he retrieved his phone and turned on the flashlight. He stepped into the room she had just escaped without hesitation. Within seconds, he found the thin red thread lying near the corner and returned with it held carefully between his fingers as though it were something precious. He knelt again and looped it gently around her wrist, tying it with patient precision. His fingertips brushed her skin, sending a quiet shiver through her. "You dropped this," he murmured. And his tone said what his words did not. "I will not let you lose the things that matter." She exhaled shakily. "Thank you." He held her gaze. "Always." The word echoed in her chest. "Always." He helped her stand, slowly steadying her without gripping too tightly. When she faltered, he reached for her waist instinctively but stopped the moment she steadied herself. His restraint was almost as intimate as touch. "You should go home," he said finally. "You have had enough for one day." She nodded, though she did not want to move. Not yet. Not away from this unexpected safety. Adrian stepped back only when he was certain she could stand on her own. His suit jacket still rested over her shoulders, its weight a reminder of something she tried not to name. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. His answer was immediate, quiet, fierce. "I heard you, and I will hear you again if you ever need me." She walked toward the elevator, glancing back only once. He stood in the hallway watching her with an expression that softened the edges of everything she feared. She did not know yet that this rescue would mark the moment when rumors became truths, when protection became personal, and when the line between their worlds began to disappear. By the next morning, the building felt colder, as if the air itself sensed a shift in power. Maya arrived early, hoping to blend into the quiet hours before the office filled, but her chest tightened the moment she stepped onto the 54th floor. Something was wrong. Not the usual whispers or side glances, something heavier, thicker, intentional. She pushed her cart slowly down the hallway, her mind still replaying the night before, the darkness of that closet, the terror swallowing her breath, and then the moment everything changed. Adrian breaking the lock. Adrian kneeling beside her, Adrian tying the red thread around her wrist as though sealing a promise neither of them dared to speak. She touched the bracelet, how her fingers trembling slightly. The memory warmed her, but also terrified her. She could not afford feelings. Not here. Not when the entire building seemed determined to turn her into a threat. She reached the corner conference room when a notification pinged sharply from her phone. She glanced down. Company-wide announcement. Emergency ethics review. Mandatory attendance for all senior staff. That alone was unusual, but what froze her was the second message. An internal press inquiry circling. Subject line. Allegations of misconduct between CEO and cleaning staff. Her breath turned to ice. Allegations. Misconduct. They were not rumors anymore. They were accusations. She felt her knees weaken. Before she could process it, a voice sliced through the hallway like a blade dipped in honey. Rough night. Maya turned. Sienna stood several feet away, holding a sleek black tablet against her chest, her posture the picture of feigned concern and sharpened triumph. Maya swallowed, forcing her voice steady. I am working. Excuse me. Sienna stepped directly into her path, Are you? Because it seems you have been very busy these days. Busy gathering attention, busy distracting the CEO, busy creating problems that fall onto my desk. Maya stiffened. I have done nothing wrong. Sienna laughed softly. That is not what the board thinks. Maya's stomach twisted. The board? Her voice came out barely audible. What does the board think? Sienna's eyes glittered. That Adrian has compromised himself. And the company. Because of you. Maya felt the hallway tilt. She shook her head, stumbling over her words. That is not true. He never. I never. But Sienna held up a hand, silencing her. Truth does not matter. Perception does. And perception can destroy a career. Or two. Maya clutched the handle of her cart. Her pulse pounded in her throat. I am just a maid. I am no threat to anyone. Sienna's smile hardened. That is where you are wrong. People like you are the most dangerous. You have nothing to lose. And men like him. She leaned in. They make mistakes when someone makes them feel seen. Maya's breath faltered. Sienna continued. Unfortunately for you, the board does not tolerate distractions, and they are about to remove theirs. Maya stared at her, unable to speak. Remove. Remove meant only one thing. Adrian's job. His position. His power. Because of her. No, she whispered. They cannot. Sienna crossed her arms. They can, and they will, unless of course there is proof of inappropriate behavior from your side. Maya felt her chest clench. Proof. Proof she did not have. Proof she did not even understand. But Sienna stepped closer, her perfume sharp in the air. Someone saw him break that lock last night, she whispered. Someone saw him carry his jacket on a floor where he never removes it. Someone saw him look at you like you mattered. Maya's heart slammed violently. You set that up. Sienna's smile did not waver. I do not need to set anything up. You two do enough damage just by existing in the same hallway. Maya trembled, anger rising through her fear. Why are you doing this? Sienna's expression flickered for a fraction of a second, revealing something raw beneath the polished cruelty. Because I have worked for years to be the one he trusts most. And you. She pointed subtly at Maya's chest. You walked in with a broom and changed everything. Her voice dropped. He was supposed to need me, not you. The admission was a crack of lightning. Personal, not strategic. Wounded, dangerous. Sienna composed herself quickly. Consider this fair warning. Maya swallowed hard. But Sienna was not finished. The board has called an emergency closed session this morning. They want answers about last night, about you, about him. Maya felt her lungs constrict. He defended me, she whispered. He should not have. Sienna's eyes sharpened. And now he will pay for it. Let me guess, she said sweetly. You thought he was different, that he cared, that he meant what he said. Her smile cut through Maya like ice. Men like him do not choose girls like you. They choose their company, their money, their legacy. Maya's chest tightened painfully. She wanted to shout that she never asked for any of this, that she never wanted him to see her, that she did not want her life to collide with his, but words refused to form. The elevator dinged at the far end of the hallway. Both women turned. Adrian stepped out, alone. No assistants, no advisors. His expression was unreadable, but his posture held tension coiled tight beneath the surface. His gaze swept the hallway and locked instantly onto Maya. Something flickered in his eyes, something strong enough that Sienna stiffened. She smoothed her hair and plastered on a smile. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell. The board is waiting for you in the executive chamber." Adrian nodded slowly but did not look at her. His attention stayed on Maya. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. The question was simple, but the impact shattered something inside her. Sienna's smile faltered. Her eyes flicked between them, rapidly interpreting every nuance. Maya struggled for breath. "I am fine." Adrian exhaled as if he knew she was lying. He took a step closer, but Sienna quickly slid between them. "Mr. Caldwell, you really must hurry. The board has already begun without you. They requested your presence immediately." She emphasized the word requested with a hint of satisfaction. Adrian did not acknowledge her. He spoke directly to Maya again. "If anything happens, you call me." She nodded, even though her throat burned. He held her gaze for another heartbeat, then turned and walked toward the executive chamber. The moment he disappeared behind the large double doors, the hallway felt colder than before. Sienna turned to Maya slowly, the victory restored in her posture. "This is where it begins," she whispered. Maya clutched the edge of her cart as if it were the only thing holding her upright. She stayed frozen even after Sienna strutted away, even after the door to the chamber clicked closed, even after her phone buzzed with a new notification. She forced herself to look at the screen. Internal memo. Effective immediately, the CEO has been placed under temporary review pending further investigation. Adrian had been suspended because of her. Her breath shattered. Her vision blurred. A hollow ache spread through her chest. She sank against the wall, unable to hold herself upright. She did not hear footsteps at first. Only when someone crouched beside her did she blink and focus. It was one of the newer custodial staff, a kind woman named Teresa. "Honey, what happened?" she asked softly. Maya shook her head, unable to answer. Teresa gently squeezed her shoulder. "Whatever it is not your fault." Maya bowed her head and let the tears fall silently. But deep down she feared Teresa was wrong. She feared she had set a storm in motion that no one could stop. She feared she had broken the one man who had protected her, and she feared the world was about to break her too. The hours after Adrian's suspension unfolded in a blur of hollow sounds and muted colors, as if the world around Maya had slipped underwater. She finished her shift on autopilot, wiping surfaces she could not see, responding to instructions she barely heard, all while her chest felt carved open. Every corner of Caldwell Tower carried echoes of him now, his steady voice grounding her in the dark closet, his jacket around her shoulders, his hand tying the red thread bracelet with a care she had not felt from anyone in years. And now he was gone, because he protected her, because she had been in the wrong hallway at the wrong time, because she had made a mistake that should have been nothing but became everything. She kept her eyes low as she left the 54th floor, desperate to avoid attention. The building was too bright, too sharp, too alive with gossip. She rode the service elevator down to the lobby and stepped into the pale evening light, cold wind brushing her face. She exhaled, shakily wrapping her arms around herself. She wanted to go home, curl beside Noah, pretend the world outside could not touch her, but fate had never cared for her plans. She reached the back entrance where custodial carts were stored overnight and nearly tripped over something sitting quietly on the lower shelf of her own cart. A small, matte black box. No label, no name, no note on top. just placed there intentionally waiting. Her breath faltered. She looked around, instinctively scanning the dim corridor, but no one was there. Heart thudding, she lifted the box. It was heavier than she expected. Her fingers hesitated before opening it. Inside, nestled in soft fabric, was a red thread bracelet. New. Untouched. Vibrant. Its color deeper and richer than the one she wore. And beneath it, folded with impossible precision, lay a handwritten letter. Her hands trembled as she lifted it, afraid the paper might dissolve if she breathed too hard. She unfolded the note slowly. The handwriting was neat, controlled, unmistakably his. Maya. If you are reading this, circumstances have changed sooner than I expected. My removal was inevitable once they realized I would not participate in what they wanted. They will tell you this is about ethics. It is not. It is about fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of unseen variables. Fear of anything they cannot predict. You are one of those variables. She swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in her eyes. The letter continued. I did not intend for you to become the center of this storm. It is my responsibility, not yours. They will blame you because it is convenient. But know this, I did not step back because of pressure. I stepped back because staying would have given them an excuse to turn you into a target. I refuse to allow that. Her breath hitched. He had said something similar in his office. You were alone in that room. You should not have been. But reading it now, written in his careful script, the truth sank deeper. He had not just protected her from a disciplinary report. He had stepped between her and an entire corporation willing to crush her to get to him, and he had paid the price. She steadied the letter and continued. I noticed you the moment you walked into that floor, not because of the rumors they spin now, but because you moved like someone who has carried too much weight in silence. I recognized that. I lived it. You reminded me of the person I used to be before this place demanded everything. A breath shook loose from her chest. Her hands trembled around the paper. She forced herself to keep reading. When they began watching you, I knew they would use you as a lever against me. I could not allow that. So I stepped aside. For now. If I had stayed, you would have been their casualty. And I want no harm to come to you, not because of a text, not because of a rumor, not because of me. Tears blurred the ink. She pressed her lips together hard, refusing to let out a sound. She read on. I do not expect anything from you. I do not ask you to defend me, to speak for me, or to risk anything on my behalf. I only ask that you remember the truth. You did nothing wrong, and you deserve more than the way they made you feel. Maya's vision blurred again. The letter felt like a hand reaching into something fragile inside her, steadying it. There was a final paragraph. One she had to blink several times to see clearly. I do not know when or if our paths will cross again, but I wanted you to have this. The red thread you wear has held so much for so long. It is time for something new to carry the weight with you. When you are ready, choose which one you want to keep. And if someday you wish to give me an answer to the message you meant to send, I will hear it. A. The signature was just a single letter, but she felt it like a whisper pressed against her skin. Maya closed her eyes, holding the paper to her chest. For a moment, she let herself feel everything she had denied for days. The fear, the shame, the exhaustion, the unspoken connection between them that she could neither explain nor escape. He had left his world because hers had collided with it, and now she stood in a dim service hallway holding proof that she had mattered to a man who was not supposed to notice her at all. She stared at the new bracelet shimmering softly in the low light. It was beautiful, untouched, waiting. But she looked down at the old one on her wrist, frayed, faded, worn from the years of clinging to hope her mother had sewn into its threads. She touched the knot gently. Her mother's words echoed so clearly she almost heard them aloud. The thread will lead you to the one who sees you. Her heart squeezed painfully. Adrian saw her, not the maid, not the mistake, not the rumor, her. He saw her enough to fall on the sword she never asked him to touch. She sank slowly to the floor, leaning back against the cool metal of the storage rack, the letter open on her lap. Her tears came quietly, one by one, falling onto the paper until the ink shimmered. Not weakening her, not breaking her, releasing her. She wiped her cheeks and folded the letter with reverent care, placing it back in the box beside the new bracelet. Then she closed the lid gently, almost ceremonially. She did not know what came next. She did not know if he would return. She did not know if she was strong enough to walk through this building tomorrow wearing a target she never asked for. But she knew this. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen to protect her, not because she was useful, not because she was needed, but because she mattered, and that truth, fragile as it was, changed everything. When she finally stood and slipped the box into her bag, her pulse steadied. Her breath deepened. Her spine straightened. Somewhere deep inside her something had shifted, a quiet resolve beginning to bloom. She walked toward the exit, her steps no longer trembling. The world had taken something from her today, but it had also given her something she did not know she could still receive. A beginning. The next morning, Maya woke before her alarm, long before the sun had the courage to climb over the Bronx skyline. Her small bedroom was still wrapped in shadow, and Noah slept peacefully in the next room, his quiet breathing the only steady thing in her life. For a long moment she lay still, staring at the faint glow on her ceiling. Adrian's letter replaying in her mind like a whispered confession that refused to fade. You did nothing wrong. You deserve more than the way they made you feel. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the ache that was no longer only pain but something reshaping itself into strength. She rose quietly, dressed in her uniform with slow, intentional movements, then paused at the mirror. The red thread bracelet rested where it always had, but today she touched it differently with new understanding. She opened her bag and pulled out the box Adrian had left for her. Her fingers hovered over the new bracelet. She did not tie it on. Not yet. She was not ready to replace what had carried her for so long, but she was ready for something else. She slipped the box back into her bag and stepped out into the cold morning air. The subway seemed louder today. The station walls seemed smaller. The world seemed heavier. But she walked with steadier steps, her spine no longer curled inward. The moment she entered Caldwell Tower, however, the weight of the previous days returned like a cold hand on the back of her neck. Whispers ignited instantly. She felt them prickling against her skin. There she is. I cannot believe she came back. She should be fired. HR is reviewing her again. She pretended not to hear. She had spent her entire life learning how to keep her head down. But today she lifted it. Not defiantly, not proudly, just enough to remind herself she existed. She stepped off the elevator onto the 54th floor. The air seemed to freeze. Sienna leaned against the reception desk, her arms crossed, her smile sharp. Back again. Bold choice. Maya ignored her and pushed her cart forward. Sienna followed. I imagine you are curious what happened at the board meeting. Maya paused, slowly turning toward her. No. Sienna's smile tightened, clearly irritated by the unexpected resistance. He argued for you, she said, until the end, until they forced him to step down. Maya breathed in deeply. Steady, quiet, controlled. That is his decision, she said softly. Not yours. You think he did it for you? Sienna scoffed. Men like him only act strategically. Maya studied her carefully. Was that what you wanted from him? Sienna blinked, startled for a second. Her mask slipped just enough for Maya to see the resentment underneath. Do not get comfortable, she whispered coldly. He is gone, and you will be next. Maya inhaled sharply but did not respond. Instead, she pushed her cart toward the conference hallway where she needed to begin her tasks. She expected her hands to shake the way they always did after confrontation, but they did not. They moved steadily, each motion grounding her. She cleaned the windows, straightened chairs, wiped the shared screens. She worked with precision, not out of fear anymore, but out of dignity. Her dignity. She was wiping the metal door frame when a small group of employees entered the corridor. One of them, a junior assistant named Chloe, looked at Maya with a mixture of hesitation and guilt. Maya, can we talk? Maya froze. Chloe stepped forward nervously. I saw what happened yesterday. I saw Sienna near that closet before you went in." Maya's heart skipped. Chloe continued. "I did not say anything and I should have. I'm sorry." Maya steadied herself. "Thank you for telling me." Chloe's shoulders sagged in relief. "HR has been asking questions. If they talk to me again, I will tell them the truth." Maya nodded softly. "Thank you." Chloe left quickly, but her words lingered. For the first time since the rumors started, someone had stepped toward Maya instead of away from her. A spark of courage flickered inside her. As the morning progressed, more small moments found her. A security guard gave her a sympathetic nod. A new intern offered to help pick up a dropped bin liner. Teresa, the custodian who comforted her earlier, squeezed her forearm gently in passing. These were small gestures, almost invisible, but together they formed something she had not felt since before her mother died. Support. A faint hum of solidarity. As Maya cleaned the glass along the northeast windows, she caught her reflection. She looked the same, but her eyes did not. She saw someone who had survived humiliation and cruelty and fear. Someone who had been protected and also abandoned. Someone who had been pushed down but was now rising not because of Adrian's protection, but because she had found something inside herself she thought she had lost. Her own voice. She finished her tasks and headed to HR for the follow-up they had requested. The same representative sat behind the same desk with the same polite but distant expression. Maya sat across from her, hands folded but steady. "Thank you for coming," the HR woman began. "Given the increasing concern regarding boundary issues, we need to ask additional questions." Maya lifted her gaze. "I have questions too." The woman blinked. Maya continued. "Why was I called into a meeting based on a rumor? Why was I asked to sign a document without an investigation? Why was a safety risk ignored when I was locked in a closet?" The HR representative shifted uncomfortably. "Please understand, Miss Ellis, we are reviewing all details." "Good, then please include this." Maya took a breath. "I was intentionally locked in that room, and I know who did it." The HR woman stiffened. "Who?" Maya met her eyes steadily. "Sienna Blake." Shock registered across the representative's face. "That is a serious allegation, and it is true. I am no longer scared to say it." Silence stretched. Finally, the woman nodded, her professional facade cracking slightly. "We will open an investigation immediately." Maya rose slowly. "Thank you." When she stepped outside the office, her hands were shaking again, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from release, from reclaiming her own story. She returned to the 54th floor for the last part of her shift. As she gathered her supplies into the cart one final time, she looked around the hallway. She had walked these floors as a shadow, a rumor, a burden, but now she walked as something else, someone aware of her value, someone aware that she did not have to shrink to survive. She took one last look at the CEO's office. Its door was closed, dark, empty. But she did not cry. Instead, she whispered softly, almost reverently, "Thank you for seeing me." Then she turned and walked toward the elevator. With each step, the weight on her chest lifted. She was not leaving defeated. She was leaving changed. And she did not yet know it, but her path was already shifting toward a choice she would make not because Adrian led her there, but because she had finally learned to lead herself. Brooklyn smelled of roasted espresso and early morning warmth, a comforting contrast to the cold glass tension of Caldwell Tower. For the first time in weeks, Maya felt her shoulders loosen when she stepped into the tiny cafe where she had picked up temporary shifts. The owner, a kind older woman named Lorraine, greeted her with a smile that did not hide judgment or curiosity. Just warmth. Just humanity. Maya tied her apron with a steadier breath than she expected. The world she returned to now felt smaller, but safer, and she needed that. After the past week, her body felt like it had lived a year. She moved through the morning rush with quiet efficiency, pouring coffee, taking orders, wiping tables. The chatter around her was normal grounding. No whispers, no stares, no politics disguised as concern. A few customers smiled at her. One complimented her latte art. For a moment she almost remembered what peace felt like, But peace did not erase the memory of a man who had walked into HR for her. It did not erase the feel of his jacket on her shoulders, or the letter she kept folded in her bag edges softening from the number of times she touched it. Around noon, after the rush had thinned, Maya stepped outside to take a short break. She leaned against the brick wall, inhaling the scent of warm bread from the bakery across the street. The city noise comforted her. It reminded her she was one of millions, free to disappear if she wished. Yet she did not want to disappear, not anymore. She reached into her bag and pulled out the small matte box. Her fingers traced the edges. She opened it slowly. The new red thread bracelet glowed against the soft lining like an ember waiting to ignite. She lifted it gently, the threads smooth and strong, untouched by years of wear. Holding it made her heart ache. Her old bracelet still circled her wrist, frayed but stubborn. Her mother's words echoed again. When you meet the person who truly sees you, the thread will respond. She exhaled shakily. She had felt something respond in her chest the moment Adrian looked at her in that hallway, the moment he whispered, "Say it again," the moment he broke open the locked room to find her. But she could not let a moment decide her fate. She needed to understand herself first, to choose herself first. She slipped the bracelet back inside the box just as a shadow fell over her. Lorraine poked her head out. "Maya, sweetheart, someone left this for you." She handed her a small, cream-colored envelope, plain, unaddressed. Maya frowned. "Who?" Lorraine shrugged. "He did not leave a name, just said you would understand." Maya's pulse stuttered. She tore open the flap. Inside was a single card with a handwritten line. Café Mirren, 4 p.m. No pressure, just presence. Signed with the same single initial, A. Her breath caught. Her heart seemed to trip over itself. She reread the note several times, each word sinking deeper. No pressure, just presence. The simplicity broke something tender inside her. For a long moment, she stood frozen on the sidewalk, feeling the city shift around her. Should she go? Was this wise? Was this safe? Was this crossing a boundary she had fought so hard to reclaim? She pressed the card to her chest. She remembered the fear in the supply closet. The sound of his voice saying, "You are safe." She remembered the letter. "I stepped aside because staying would have given them an excuse to turn you into a target." She remembered her own words to HR that morning. "I am no longer scared to say it." She exhaled slowly. She could not deny the truth. She wanted to see him, not because he saved her, not because he sacrificed his position, but because he saw her in a way no one had since her mother died, and she wanted to understand why. She returned to the cafe and worked the rest of her shift with a quiet intensity, each minute carrying her closer to the moment she had not allowed herself to imagine. By 3:40, she was standing in the employee restroom, staring at her reflection. Her hands shook as she adjusted her hair. She wore jeans and a simple blouse. Nothing special, nothing glamorous, but she felt real, solid, herself. She slipped the matte box with the bracelet into her bag. Then she stepped out into the late afternoon sun and began the walk to Café Mirren. Her heart thudded with each block. When she reached the corner, she saw it a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a florist, its windows fogged with the warmth of fresh pastries. Adrian sat at a corner table near the back. He was alone. No assistants, no suit jacket. Just him, in a dark sweater, sleeves rolled, hands folded on the table as if grounding himself. He did not see her at first. He stared at the empty seat across from him, his expression unreadable but softer than she had ever seen. Vulnerable. Human. Relief washed through her so suddenly it weakened her knees. She stepped inside. The bell over the door chimed. That was when he looked up. His breath caught barely visibly, but she saw it. His expression changed in a way she felt rather than understood. Not surprise, not regret. Something deeper, something like quiet gratitude. She approached slowly, her pulse loud in her ears. He stood as she reached the table. "You came," he said softly. "I did not know if you would." She swallowed. "I did not know either." They sat. Silence stretched for a moment, but it was not heavy. It was the kind that allowed thought to breathe. Adrian studied her gently. "How are you?" She searched for honesty. Better today, stronger. His eyes softened. Good, you deserve that. She looked down at her hands. I read your letter. He nodded once as if bracing for her reaction. She continued. You should not have stepped down because of me. His jaw tightened. I stepped down because the board was looking for a reason to. You were not the cause. You were the excuse. Anger flickered through her. Because they feared something unplanned. No, because they feared something they could not control. She held his gaze. Me. Us, he corrected quietly. Her breath trembled. She did not know how to hold the weight of that word. Adrian lowered his eyes briefly, then looked up again with a steadiness that made her pulse race. I do not expect anything from you. I did not ask you here to decide anything. I asked you here so you would know you are not alone. She pressed her lips together, fighting the sudden sting in her chest. He continued. I know what it is to feel invisible, to be overlooked, to be punished for existing in the wrong place. She held her breath. You are not invisible, Maya. You never were. The words sank into her like warmth after a long winter. She reached into her bag and placed the mat box on the table. His eyes flickered with recognition. I did not know if I should accept this, she whispered. It felt like something too important to choose lightly. Adrian leaned forward slightly, careful, patient. You do not have to choose now, or ever. She exhaled shakily. My mother always said the thread would respond when I met someone who truly saw me. His gaze locked on hers. Did it? She hesitated, then nodded once silently, gently, honestly. Adrian's breath deepened the only sign of how deeply her answer struck him, but instead of reaching for her, he relaxed his posture, grounding himself. Then he did something she did not expect. He looked away, first giving her space, real space, not distance meant to protect himself, distance meant to empower her. You get to decide what comes next, he said. Not the board, not Sienna, not the rumors. You. Maya stared at him a long moment, absorbing the truth of his words. For the first time in her life, the path ahead was not determined by necessity or fear. It was hers to shape, hers to choose. And she knew there was only one real choice she needed to make now. The choice to stop running from her own voice. She clasped her hands together and whispered, I want to see where this goes, only if it is built on honesty, on respect, on something real. Adrian's entire expression softened into something warm and quiet and breathtaking. Then we start with honesty, he said. No expectations, no pressure, just presence. She nodded, her heart steady for the first time in days. This was not a confession, not a declaration. It was a beginning, one she had chosen for herself, and somewhere deep inside she felt the red thread around her wrist tighten gently as if acknowledging the moment. The thread was leading her, but this time she was walking by choice. The late afternoon light filtered through the windows of Café Mirren in soft gold, warming the space around them as though the universe was deliberately quieting itself for this moment. Maya sat across from Adrian with her hands wrapped around a cup she had barely touched, her pulse thrumming with a mixture of uncertainty and something gentler that she tried not to name too quickly. Across from her, Adrian held still, his posture relaxed, but his eyes attentive, watching her with the same quiet intensity she had felt from him since the first morning their paths collided. For the first time, there were no glass walls between them, no board members, no rumors. No expectations from a world determined to weaponize anything it did not understand. Just two people, sitting at a small corner table, learning how to breathe in each other's presence. Maya glanced at him as he pushed his sleeves higher on his forearms, revealing faint lines of exhaustion that made him look human instead of untouchable. She found the sight strangely comforting. He did not try to hide his weariness from her, and that honesty opened something in her chest she had locked away for years. You look tired, she whispered before she could stop herself. His lips lifted in the faintest suggestion of a smile. I am, but I prefer this kind of tired, the kind that comes after choosing something rather than being forced into it. His gaze held hers with a meaning that made her heartbeat stutter. She looked down quickly, tracing the rim of her cup with her finger. Does that choice come with regrets? He hesitated before answering. Yes, but none of them are about you. Something warm bloomed beneath her ribs. She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of everything unsaid between them. After a long moment, she spoke quietly. I thought you would be angry with me. For everything that happened. Adrian leaned back slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her feel seen and steadied at the same time. Why would I be angry? Because they punished you because of me, she whispered, because you lost something important. Adrian shook his head slowly. I did not lose anything that mattered. She blinked at him, unable to respond. He continued. Power means nothing if you cannot choose how to use it. I chose to step away. I chose to protect you. I chose to come here today. His voice softened, and I would choose it again. Maya's breath trembled. She looked down and pulled the matte box from her bag, setting it on the table between them. His eyes flickered the smallest shift, but enough for her to notice. I was scared to bring this, she admitted. Scared it would mean something I was not ready for. Scared it would mean something you expected. Adrian shook his head again, slower, this time gentler. I expect nothing from you, Maya. She opened the box and lifted the new bracelet, letting it rest in her palm. It felt warm, despite the cool cafe air. She traced its smooth threads and whispered, This is beautiful, too beautiful. It feels like a promise, something important. Adrian's gaze deepened. It is not a promise unless you want it to be. She inhaled shakily. And if I do not know yet, then you do not choose. Yet, he said simply. The ease in his tone made her throat tighten. He was not trying to pull her closer. He was not pushing her away. He was giving her space, a gift she had never been given in her entire life. Maya set the bracelet gently back into the box and closed the lid. I want to understand this, she whispered. Understand us. Understand what this is becoming. Adrian's voice lowered. Then ask me anything. She looked up sharply. Anything? Yes. She considered his offer carefully. Most men she had known or worked around were guarded to the point of coldness, especially men with power. But he was sitting across from her, offering vulnerability instead of walls. She steadied her breath. Why did you step in at HR? Really? He seemed to think for a moment before answering. Because you were alone in that room, and aloneness can be used as a weapon. I have seen it. I have lived it. Maya's chest tightened. Someone used to silence you, he added quietly. I recognized the look in your eyes. You were not afraid of losing your job. You were afraid of not mattering. Her throat closed with emotion. He was right. Loss was familiar. Being unseen was the thing that broke her. She whispered, barely audible, How did you see that? Because I know what it feels like to be valued only for what you can do and fought for who you are. His eyes shifted with something like memory, shadowed and vulnerable. My father used to say feelings were liabilities. Every day I became quieter until I could not hear myself anymore. Maya felt her heart ache quietly for him, but she also felt something else. Connection. She reached forward without thinking and placed her hand near his, not touching but close enough to acknowledge what he had shared. And did anyone ever hear you? She asked softly. He met her gaze. Not until now. Her breath caught. For a moment neither of them spoke. The softness between them thickened into something warm and fragile and immense. Then Maya whispered the question that had lived inside her since the first day, that morning in the office. When you stepped closer, when you whispered, what did you mean? Adrian's expression shifted into something unreadable but tender. The room around them dimmed, the noise fading into a distant hum. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to retreat. She did not. Their faces were inches apart now, breath mingling in the warm air of the quiet cafe. He whispered exactly as he had then, but softer, more deliberate, more honest. Do not be afraid of being seen. The words sank into her like sunlight through frost. She exhaled, trembling with understanding. In that office, he had not demanded. He had not tested. He had not played a power game. He had offered her something she had never been offered: permission. To exist. To matter. To be seen without apology. Tears welled in her eyes, though she blinked them back quickly. She did not want pity. She wanted truth. She whispered back, "I have been afraid my whole life." He nodded once slowly. "You do not have to be with me." Something inside her cracked open quietly but irrevocably. She felt herself leaning forward without meaning to, drawn to him by gravity that had existed beneath their encounters from the start. She stopped just short of touching him, breath shaking in the inches that separated them. Adrian did not move, did not rush her, did not assume. He waited, for her choice, for her voice, and for the first time in her life she felt ready to use it. She placed the matte box between them and opened it again. She lifted both bracelets this time, the old frayed one, the new one he had given her. She set them both on the table in front of him. Her voice was soft but steady. "I want to choose, but I do not want to choose alone." Adrian's breath deepened, his voice nearly a whisper. "Then we choose together." She nodded slowly, her pulse trembling like wings. A silence full of promise settled between them, not the silence of fear, not the silence of invisibility, the silence of two people standing on the edge of something real. When they finally rose to leave, neither reached for the other's hand. They did not need to. Their steps synced naturally, as though following the same thread one woven years ago, one placed in her hands anew, one now stretching between them with quiet certainty. Tonight she had not fallen into his world, and he had not pulled her into it. They had stepped into the same space willingly, as equals, as something just beginning, and neither of them looked back. The following weeks unfolded with a quiet steadiness that felt strange at first, almost unreal. After everything that had happened, Maya expected chaos. More whispers, more accusations, more moments when she would feel the world closing around her. Instead, she found herself waking each morning with a different kind of tension inside her. Not fear, not dread, something gentler, something like anticipation. At Caldwell Tower, the shifts in power echoed through every hallway. The board announced Adrian's transition from CEO to Chief Technology Officer, framing it as a strategic repositioning. But everyone knew the truth. He had stepped aside before they could force him out, and now the building moved with a different rhythm. Quieter, less volatile, still full of scrutiny but no longer aimed at her. Maya arrived for her final week of cleaning duties with careful steps. She had already accepted a new opportunity, one that still felt impossible, but she needed to finish the last of her work before she left. Word had spread through the custodial staff that she was moving into an administrative position within the new Community Programs Division, a role far above her previous one. A role no one could diminish. Most assumed it was nepotism, connections, favor, but she knew the truth. Adrian had put her name forward, yes, but he had not pressured anyone. He had not whispered in the right ears or manipulated HR. He simply gave her an opportunity, and she earned the rest during a quiet, meticulous interview that tested her resilience more than her resume. For the first time, someone from Caldwell Tower looked at her and saw potential rather than status. On her first day in the new building wing, she found a small welcome note taped to her desk. "Congratulations, Maya. Do not let anyone make you small. You have earned this." She did not need to guess who had asked for it to be delivered anonymously. She touched the note and inhaled deeply. Moving into this new role meant she would no longer wear a uniform, no longer push a cleaning cart past offices where she was ignored, no longer shrink under fluorescent lights hoping no one noticed her. She pulled her chair back, smoothed her blouse, and began sorting the orientation materials. She still struggled to believe all of this was real. A soft knock sounded at the doorway. Maya looked up. Chloe, the junior assistant who had spoken up for her, smiled nervously. "I wanted to check on you. How was your first morning? Maya felt a warmth bloom in her chest. Good. Different. Scary. But good. Chloe laughed softly. Well, for what it is worth, people here already like you. A few even said you handled that HR thing better than they would have. Maya's cheeks warmed. She did not want to be known for the scandal. She wanted to be known for the work, but hearing that people viewed her with something other than pity or suspicion eased a weight she had carried for months. As the day progressed, she found comfort in the simple rhythm of new responsibilities, managing outreach files, organizing community proposals, meeting with the department head. She listened more than she spoke, but not because she feared her voice, because she was learning to use it intentionally. In the afternoon, she attended her first departmental briefing. She sat near the back, still adjusting to the unfamiliar environment when she sensed a shift in the air. The room stirred. People straightened. Murmurs moved down the row. Maya did not need to turn around to know why. Adrian entered quietly through the side door. He wore no suit jacket, just a dark shirt and that familiar composed stillness that seemed to quiet every space he occupied. He nodded to the department head, then slid into an empty seat 2 rows behind Maya. She felt the awareness of him instantly subtle, warm, unmistakable. She kept her eyes forward, but her pulse responded in a way she could not control. The presentation continued. Numbers, graphics, new initiatives. She tried to focus, but every now and then she felt his gaze brush her like a gentle hand along her spine. Not claiming, not warning, simply acknowledging presence. At one point, a comment sparked mild laughter in the room. Maya allowed herself a small smile, and she felt rather than saw the shift behind her. His breath, his silence, his quiet attention. When the meeting ended and the room emptied, Maya gathered her notes slowly, unsure whether she should approach him or wait. She did not have to decide. Adrian stepped forward, stopping just inside her periphery. His voice was soft enough only she could hear. "You handled yourself well today?" She looked up at him, heart tight. "I felt out of place." "You were not." She exhaled the tension in her chest, loosening. "Are you settling into the new role?" Maya nodded. "It feels strange not to have a cart to push." His lips softened into something like a smile. "You were never meant to push one forever." She hesitated. "And you? Are you all right?" His brow softened slightly. For a long moment he did not answer. Then he said quietly, "I am learning to breathe again. Without the weight of a title, I outgrew." She studied him gently. "It suits you." His gaze deepened. "Does it?" She nodded. "You seem more yourself." The quiet emotion that flashed across his eyes made her inhale sharply. He stepped closer, slow enough to gauge her comfort, and spoke even more softly. "Knowing you are here makes it easier." Her breath caught in her throat. She looked away, both flustered and warmed. "People will talk. Let them." His answer was immediate, steady. "People always talk. But truth is louder if you let it stand." She looked up again, fully meeting his eyes. "I do not want to hide anymore." His expression shifted, something tender and profound rising to the surface. Then he extended his hand not to hold hers but to gesture down the hall. "Walk with me." She hesitated only a moment before nodding. They walked side by side through the quieter evening corridors, neither speaking at first. It felt natural, unforced, as though their steps had aligned long before their worlds had. When they reached the observation deck at the end of the hall, Maya paused. The city glittered beyond the glass, the exact spot where everything began, the exact place she once cleaned without daring to look up. Beside her, Adrian stood with his hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed in a way that came only when he stood with someone he trusted. "This place feels different now," she whispered. Adrian's gaze flickered to her wrist. Slowly he reached out. "May I?" She lifted her arm toward him. He brushed the old red thread, gently tracing the worn fiber as if reading its history. She had never felt so vulnerable or so seen. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the new bracelet, the one he gave her, the one she had not yet chosen. Her breath trembled. Adrian's voice lowered to a whisper that hummed against her skin. "You do not have to decide because of me." But if you want a new beginning, let me tie it this time." Her eyes burned. She nodded. Hands steady, he untied the worn bracelet with reverence, folded it carefully, then tied the new one tightly around her wrist, sealing the knot with quiet intention. When he looked up, their faces were inches apart. His voice softened into something that reached straight through her. No more hiding. She felt her heart answer him like a flame leaning toward warmth. "No more hiding," she whispered back. As the city glowed around them, neither stepped closer, neither needed to. The choice had already been made. Two threads tied into one beginning, a beginning chosen openly, together, without fear. 1 year later, the city moved with its usual restless rhythm, but for Maya, everything felt steadier, like the world finally aligned with the quiet strength she had fought to find. The community center in Lower Manhattan buzzed with soft conversation as women gathered for an early afternoon workshop. The walls were lined with job placement boards, financial literacy guides, and photos of success stories that Maya had helped bring to life. At the front of the room, she stood with a binder in hand, her posture, confident voice, calm, hair tied loosely in a way that made her look both professional and wholly herself. Today's session focused on workplace boundaries, something she once struggled to defend but now taught with clarity and conviction. The women listened closely, some nodding slowly, others taking notes, all drawn to the sincerity in her voice. When the final questions wrapped up, Maya closed her binder and offered a warm smile. "You do not have to be loud to be heard," she said gently. "You just have to know your worth." The room erupted into applause, soft but heartfelt. As the participants filtered out, Maya stayed behind to organize materials. She felt the familiar pulse of contentment that always came after helping someone find their footing. She never imagined she would stand at the front of any room, let alone be someone others came to for guidance. She reached for the stack of papers on the table and froze halfway when she sensed a presence behind her. Quiet. Steady, familiar. She turned slowly. Adrian leaned against the doorframe, hands in his pockets, watching her with that rare softness that belonged only to moments like this. Like now. He did not say a word at first. He just looked at her with a quiet pride that warmed every corner of her chest. "I did not want to interrupt," he finally said, "but you were extraordinary up there." She shook her head shyly. "I was just doing my job. No, you were leading. You were owning the room. You were—" His words trailed off as his eyes softened even further. "Fully yourself." Her cheeks warmed, the compliment settling into her like sunlight. She removed her gloves and walked toward him. "You should not sneak into my workshops," she teased quietly. He straightened with a faint smile. "I was invited." She raised a skeptical brow. "By whom?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "By the person who inspires the work being done here." She laughed softly, pushing his shoulder with playful disbelief. "You used to be much more intimidating," she said. He inhaled with faint amusement. "I am still intimidating. Not to me." His gaze deepened. "Good." That line lingered between them, warm and quiet. Adrian's eyes drifted to her wrist where the red thread bracelet rested, neatly tied. A full year of wear had softened it, but it remained as strong as the day he pulled the knot tight. He gingerly brushed his thumb along it. "Still wearing it," he murmured. "Always," she whispered. His expression changed minutely, something emotional flickering across his eyes. A year ago, this small thread had symbolized fear and destiny intertwined. Now it symbolized choice, growth, intention, and the person she had become. Adrian stepped closer, voice dropping into a gentle question. "Maya, if that text were real, what would you say now?" The room seemed to quiet itself, leaving only the two of them standing close enough that she could hear the soft rhythm of his breath. She reached up slowly, resting her hand on his chest just above his heart. Her pulse matched his in a steady, perfect echo. Then she rose onto her toes and whispered close to his ear the words she had carried for so long without fear, now without hesitation. "I miss you too. His eyes closed for a moment as if absorbing every syllable. When he opened them again, the faint smile on his lips was the rare kind, the one she knew appeared only when something reached him deeply enough to shift the entire atmosphere around him. He took her hand not possessively, but with a quiet reverence that made her heart lift. The kind of touch that said he saw her, heard her, chose her, not because of circumstance, but because of who she had become. They stood together in the golden afternoon light, surrounded by the work she had built, the future she had shaped, and the thread that had led them not by accident, but by courage. And as she looked at him, she realized the text that had once been a mistake had become the single moment that changed both of their lives. A mistake that opened a door, a whisper that became a beginning that became a life she never dared to imagine. She squeezed his hand gently, ready to go home. His eyes warmed. With you, always. They walked out together into the soft glow of the New York afternoon, no longer hiding, no longer afraid, no longer invisible. Do you believe a single mistake can lead you to the person meant to change your life? Would you have answered that text if it was you? Share your thoughts below and tell me where you are watching from. Let me know if you want more stories like this one.